Hello, and welcome to Synity's first ever global virtual summit. A summit is by definition a forum for us to convene in order to dialogue and share regarding a common cause. For this summit, we have brought together industry leaders, experts, and practitioners to discuss the role of data in the context of business, hence our theme, where business and data converge. I am Leonard McGann, Chief Customer Officer at Synity. At Synity, we solve complex data challenges in order to keep supply chains running, improve cash liquidity or margins, meet compliance demands, and more. We are pleased to showcase a group of industry and business leaders from Unilever, SAP, Senzing, and some of our own Synity experts to share and exchange their insights on data transformations, CDO perspectives, context computing, data management, why purpose matters, and even roundtables where you can help set the agenda.
Our last session for the day is a live moderated session with some of our experts around the world, from the US, Australia, South Africa, New Zealand, and Singapore. All of our panelists are practicing data experts and consultants and have extensive hands-on experience in businesses and public organizations through their digital business transformation, where business and data converge, the theme for our virtual summit. Their expertise span across industries including, but not limited to, manufacturing and distribution, life sciences, regulated industries, retail, and a wide spectrum of business outcomes, navigating business processes such as supply chain, procure to pay, order to cash, HCM, PLM, and others. Be sure to use the chat feature on the bottom of your screen to submit your questions and exchange ideas and insights. Enjoy your interactive session, and thank you once again for joining our virtual summit.
Hello, everybody. I'm Nate LaFurl. I'm based in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I've been with Synity for about 9 years now, most of them as a consultant leading some of our largest engagements. I have the privilege of supporting more than 600 consultants through our global consulting talent organization here at Synity, and I'm excited to introduce you to 3 of these folks. Hey, everybody. Because you're all friends, I want to start us off with a little bit of a curveball. And so before we went live, I let you guys know that I would ask you to give me a quick introduction and tell me a little bit about your background. What I didn't tell you is that I'm also going to ask you to share your most embarrassing quarantine adaptation that you've had to make over the past few weeks. So just to make this fair, I'm going to start. I'm both proud and very, very, very not proud of the fact that I've been able to teach our 4-month-old son to hold his own bottle so he can feed himself now. So on that note, let's start with Alyssa Sliney. She's a delivery partner and our global MDM practice lead at Synity, and she's entering her 15th year with the company. She's been really instrumental in growing our data governance offerings, and she is coming to us live from Massachusetts. So Alyssa, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, thanks, Nate. So I started my Synity career in migration, but I found myself really drawn to the more solutioning side when it came to the migration. So I transitioned to the governance practice probably about 6 years ago. And so since that time, I've spent most of my time either actually implementing for clients or part of the sales cycle, really doing some design work and advice to help our clients find the right solution. As far as my most embarrassing modification, I'd probably say my day-to-day hairdos, right? So I'm not on video too often. Today I've, washed it, blow dried it. More often than not, it's in a top knot on the top of my head.
Nice. So next up, we've got Katie Sheriff. She's a managing consultant, and she is an engagement leader for our company. She's been with us for about 10 years now, and she's our resident globetrotter. So she's lived and led projects in South Africa and Singapore, Great Britain and Switzerland. And she is now coming to us live from San Diego. Katie, say hi.
Hi. I started my career in data actually in 2007, but joined Synity about 10 years ago. I mostly focused on migration. I've had the pleasure of working with both Pedro and Alyssa in the past, which has been great. I focus on those global system consolidations and mostly in finance, which is great because almost every company has finance. So my most embarrassing adaptation, I lived on a boat until just before the quarantine, and now I live in a house. So my whole life has changed. So I think just having a whole big kitchen, and I've been baking a lot, which is dangerous. So I'm much more domesticated than I used to be.
I've actually started baking too. I'm kind of embarrassed to say. And then finally, we've got the one and only Pedro Cardoso. He's a delivery partner who's been with us for 11 years. You guys might be noticing a little bit of a trend. And he's led some of our largest Canadian engagements. He's an expert in the automotive and retail industries. And Pedro in Toronto, you're up.
Thank you, Nate, and team. So like many, you've had a long career in IT. I've held many roles. I came out of university with electrical engineering and software engineering background, which I think made me hardwired for data from early on. Learning how to spell SAP in 1999, and you can check the bio. I did start when I was 10. And, from that perspective, held many roles, again, everything from, BI to ERP implementations to business process reengineering, AS400 operator, you pretty much, the whole gambit. And I began to realize that, data issues that were coming up and up were really more business process issues and more people issues. And, that's really what drew me to Synity when I joined is, Synity and we have a tagline that, the business owns the data. And that's where I've been for the last 11 years, as Nate says. And I'm excited to be here today talking to you guys about our favorite topic, data. Oh, and
Thanks,
my
Pedro.
most embarrassing COVID moment.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, so also the hair thing. So I have here my engineering hat. So I do don this frequently when I'm having a early meeting and I haven't had a chance to do the hair thing. So that is for me. My
That is
COVID
embarrassing.
moment.
Might have to take a tip, Pedro. Get a hat, is what you're telling me.
Nice. So, before we get started, just a quick programming note for the audience. This session is 100% live, so we are here to meet you and answer your questions. So please make generous use of the Q&A box below. I'll be asking your questions to our experts. So go ahead and pick their brains and start submitting your questions now, and we'll get to them over the course of the session. So I'll just kind of jumpstart a little bit. The four of us have been friends and colleagues for a long time. I think, we've got more than 40 years of combined experience just at Synity alone, not counting other consulting background. And, millions of miles traveled across the globe until March. So, you might notice a trend of experience, right? And we do firmly believe that experience matters here at Synity. And these are just 3 of over 100 consultants at Synity that have actually been with the company for more than a decade. So we're really proud of the experience that we bring every day. So what I wanted to kind of start with and just kind of pick your brains on is really the notion of change over that decade that we've just lived through. What I think about when I joined Synity, then back office in 2011, it was really not that hard to unearth unknown or surprising data issues that were having a massive business impact. And we spent a lot of time surprising our customers with big issues and then helping guide them through the solution and optimizing their business as a result. What I've personally noticed is, as the years have gone on, data literacy has increased so much, right? Our customers and our clients and our partners really understand their data in a way that they never have before. So they're tuned into the hotspots. They know what their issues are. They don't need any less help solving them. But I've noticed that it's much less of a fishing expedition than it used to be. And we're much more targeted and surgical because we're able to partner with the business and some of the pain points that they already know they have. So I'm curious what you guys think has changed most working in data over the past decade. So just open it up. Maybe Pedro, you want to start us off?
Sure. For me, Nate, it's a real dichotomy, right? I think, thinking back, I could say that, the most profound thing for me is that, everything's changed and nothing's changed. I mean, on the technology side, you can look up and down the stack and we've got, the most amazing tools, technology, and enablements that, wasn't existing, 20 years ago and even 10 years ago. But I think fundamentally, from a data perspective, things haven't changed for many. I mean, I remember back when I was working in BI in the 2000s, and complaining about what are those ERP people doing? I'm trying to build good reports in my team, but the data's not right. We can't build good reports. What's wrong with the data? Hearing users asking for better data, better information, and the promise for one source of truth. So I think a lot of those challenges still exist today. And I think, we're better prepared now, I think, though, to handle that than we ever were. I think on the other side, I think there's a huge difference now with respect to awareness about data. Thinking to this, the COVID-19 global, challenge we find all of us in, data is top of mind. And, from a data perspective, everyone's looking at, what the data tells us in terms of how we move the new normal, how we, look at the number of, tests being performed, number of, positives, number of kind of recovered. I think the understanding of the importance of data today has changed. And I think that kind of helps, certainly us as practitioners, kind of start that conversation off.
Yeah, so for me, go ahead, Katie.
Sorry. I think looking back over my career, in 2007 when I started, almost no one had any idea what I did, and it was difficult to talk to people. And now everyone I meet or talk to, not even just through business interactions, but generally, has some story to tell me about their experience. And I think that's very telling. It just changes the starting point of the conversation. That's, my experience.
Yeah, I think especially in governance, we spend a lot of time previously doing a lot of education to get to a starting point. Now what we're finding is there's so many definitions of governance, we're actually having to just bring everyone into alignment. So still an important starting conversation, but it's just shifted a little bit. And then from an implementation perspective, I think we've seen a big move away from single instance, right? When we started, everyone was trying to get into a single place with their data. And now, I mean, not only do we have the bolt-ons of, Salesforce, PLM, HCM, but we also are just seeing a move away from driving towards a single ERP. So that's just introducing complexity in other, management pieces, business glossary, understanding your lineage, that we have to accommodate for and make sure that's part of our strategy.
Definitely. And Pedro, I know you mentioned COVID, and I know that's something that's probably at the top of mind for our audience. I know it's top of mind for me. Have you seen some changes in the implementation strategies and projects since the crisis hit in the past couple of months? Or how have our clients been reacting?
Yeah, Nate, I think it's a great question. I think from a project perspective, I think for those of us who are used to using, some of the collaboration tools we're using right now, not a lot has changed, but it's been amazing to see, I think, the entire world sort of move at warp speed to really adopt a lot of this collaboration technology that, we had already available, but, we're kind of moving a bit slower. I think the broader implication of that is I think we are shifting from what today is, I think, a short-term response to COVID, but probably a long-term pattern that's going to stay with us in terms of how we work and collaborate together. I think for projects specifically, I think it's actually a great opportunity. What I'm seeing on projects is, and I don't know if it's because of people having to adopt to the change that the COVID situation is putting us all in, everyone kind of working from home and adjusting to this new normal. But I find that, from a change management perspective on projects that I'm on, things that we used to spend a lot of time on around stakeholder management, getting people to make decisions and be willing to change. And we know, data is a lot about change management as well. I think it's an opportunity for a lot of companies to really seize, this new normal and the attitude that I think people are more open to change now, which I think for data in particular is exciting. And maybe an opportunity to leapfrog the competition for those companies that can really, seize this time and this phenomenon to their, to some advantage.
So one thing I'm seeing is even a larger emphasis on ROI for efforts, right? And so starting with the end in mind is even more crucial now than it ever was before, right? You've got tons of budget pressure. We're seeing, some companies go down to maybe a 4-day work week, and so your time is physically becoming compressed. And so any initiative you're going to take on or continue needs to have maximum return on investment.
Yeah, so I think Alyssa, I'll actually stay with you on that one. I know as you mentioned, governance becomes so much more important, and I think especially as we look at, potentially disparate processes remaining in disparate systems, probably continuing as a trend in the short term as capital expenditures get deferred and things like that. Data governance isn't a new concept or a new initiative, and I think a lot of companies have made fits and starts in this direction, but maybe haven't gotten the momentum that they would have liked to. And I think those conversations are probably coming up all over again. And so I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that and how to really start off on the right foot there.
Sure. So one thing actually it's been pretty interesting working with healthcare industries, there's actually a pretty strong emphasis right now on the business glossary. So they're taking many of the reports they already needed to satisfy HIPAA and other requirements that they've got, but they're now putting emphasis on the business glossary to get the most value out of those reports, which is actually something I was surprised at, right? So that tends to be the thing that's a little bit harder to get business buy-in on. And so they're actually doubling down on that because that gets the most value out of things and assets that they've already got.
Interesting.
From a manufacturing perspective, I think there's a lot of emphasis on business process improvement, right? Cost of goods sold, inventory management. They're just trying to optimize as much as they can. So it's not necessarily new initiatives, I would say, but it's emphasizing and tightening up of the processes that they've already got.
Interesting. And Katie, I know you spent a lot of time in industries where it's maybe a little bit less manufacturing centric. And I know some of the challenges can be a little bit different when you're not buying things to make things to sell them. I'm curious kind of what your experience has been there, or what you think some of the challenges might be for the financial industries and others that might be more intangibly based.
Right. Obviously, right now, the financial industries and insurance industries it's obviously an unprecedented time for everyone. From my personal experience with the current project I'm working on, it's a well-established project. We already were working remotely most of the time across the globe, so we haven't seen too much of an impact. We're really in a very reusable, repeatable process that's been established, and so we haven't had too many challenges there. I think the reporting and all of the need for reporting and just access to the data real time is always important, and I think that will come out as one of the key takeaways is that the ability to report real time is critical, regardless of how much data you have.
And when we think about working in finance and insurance and things like that, what are some of the specific data areas? Is it things like, reconciliation or volumes that drive the conversation? What is really the big governance driver in those industries in your experience?
Right. So from an insurance perspective, reconciliation is a huge process. Insurance companies tend to have a significant amount of customization due to their actuarial calculations. And every company has, from the beginning of their company, they have their own deeply embedded, customized calculations for their way they define risk. And that's how all the premiums are calculated. And so having the ability to define what information they need in order to make those actuarial calculations is critical for it to be correct, for them to assess the risk properly and consistently. So seeing those, seeing that type of information and really make the reconciliation is a huge part of that. So.
I think
one thing I should have mentioned, Nate.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Pedro, go ahead. One thing I should have mentioned on the healthcare side, the other challenge I think they're seeing there, and I think it's similar to finance, is the data volume, right? The transactional volume, the amount of history that they've got. When I did a reinsurance program project, I think they had close to 100 years of history in some cases. The ability to get your hands on that data, right? So whether that's change data capture, whether that's using data lakes, you need to physically get your hands around that data. With that kind of volume, it can be very very tricky.
Right.
I think just building on what you just said, Alyssa, as well as Katie, amidst all those challenges, right? I think there's also the ruthless pursuit. I mean, certainly in automotive and in retail, where I tend to spend a lot of my time over the last few years, is standardization. We heard Rahul earlier, kind of in the summit, talk about the importance of standardization. Everyone's looking at think about customer experience. People are looking really to unify, regardless whether they're on one system or many systems. As Alyssa mentioned, it's there's a myth. The myth of you're going to move to one ERP is no longer the case. SAP's done a fantastic job with digital core, but they've also made it interoperable with many other systems. So just getting that view and how to get that consistent view of whether it's a customer, whether it's a vehicle, whether it's relationship across the entire kind of life cycle of the relationship they have with the customers is something that's really dominating at least a lot of conversations I'm having.
Yeah, and so Pedro, I know you do actually spend a lot of time with the C-suites, in particular CIOs, talking about data quality and how those outcomes are uniquely tied back to data. And what do you find is top of mind for those folks? What is the most impactful steps that they're taking or counseling us on?
It's a great question, Nate. I think if I could pick just one thing, is we're talking a lot more about really how to manage the organizational knowledge around data. I think a lot of CIOs, a lot of companies, they've spent enormous amounts of money on data-related initiatives, but they've often found they've done that maybe more in silos, maybe more aligned with specific projects, and now they're looking to see what can they do more holistically to make sure that data is managed consistently, regardless of application or process area, or Sam, Bill, Tom, or Jerry, who've been with the company for 30 years and just know how to do things, right? So, getting that tribal knowledge out and really having a lot of discussions about, how we, at Sliney, we talk about that lifecycle data and harnessing that information. So, really about how to make sure that, the knowledge that's being, being collected, being created is available for all the other initiatives as well. Because, again, you fix something around data, in one area, it's going to pay dividends everywhere else, right? So, for me, that's one of the biggest conversations we're having is how to actually take more of a knowledge and holistic approach to data.
Yeah, and I think, Alyssa, that's probably something that comes up quite a bit on the governance space, especially when we're kind of helping with that transition from a migration to governance, and really how to emphasize that tribal knowledge, reuse, and basically establishing those business rules as assets.
Yeah, so really any time you're working with data, if you should be thinking about that as an asset producing effort. Now, migration is the best example of that, right? So you've got mappings, you've got the tribal knowledge, you've got the load programs, right? All of those really need to come out of those programs. What I still am continuing to see today is there's not really that transition plan, right? If you don't start that way, the project, right, you need to have additional, let's call it a week to do, readouts and movement of that knowledge into wherever you want to take that to the next level with governance. That really needs to be part of the plan from the start. But that's really true for any data initiative, right? Not just a migration.
Makes sense. Yeah, and I think what I'm hearing from you guys, and certainly mirrors my experience as well, is the notion that data is not, even when we're talking about the world of SAP, it is not plug and play, right? This is not something where, a vendor is a vendor is a vendor, an employee is an employee is an employee. There's real industry specific challenges, and it really takes an understanding of that data to move the needle and make sure that we've made that transition from being technically ready or just meeting a requirement to actually being right and something we can execute a business process on. I think that's something that I think about a lot when we're at our customers. It's about getting to know them, right? And I think that important step of understanding your client and their business processes and their business challenges are tricky. I'm curious, maybe Katie, if you want to start me off, what do you think is and this is a question from the audience, what is the most important skill when you've identified when getting to know your customer? Like, what is the secret sauce for establishing that relationship and really getting down to the root of what they do and how they do it?
I think the best thing I've found is helping them to identify their true underlying problems. Sometimes you'll see the outcomes of several underlying issues that they're having. And just because they see one problem doesn't mean if you fix that, you're just going to see something else. So true problem solving and troubleshooting and getting down to the details, which help you understand their business better, and asking lots of questions and allowing them to provide feedback and listening to their true pain points. Those have all been my approach to getting to know my customers and to better helping them. I love problem solving, and I love coming up with creative solutions, especially repeatable ones. I will talk about reusability and repeatability all day long. And so I think that's just showing them the best way forward has been what I've done.
Yeah, so I think the listening keyword that you just mentioned at the end there, I think that's critical. I think too often when somebody thinks they know the solution, right, they'll start with that and then back the problem into it. When you hear one problem, often there's multiple root causes that's going to lead to a chain of other problems. I think listening is probably the most critical skill that you've got there.
Yeah, I think when I go in, I really look at, two different kind of, key points. And one of the things I often talk about is, we got to get rid of the smoke before we see the fire. And, finding that, understanding that, first of all, there is no such thing as bad data, right? There's somewhere there's, data, bad data isn't born. You got, data is through management of business process, through, how it's curated, how it's created, how it's updated. Within the business process, that's where the problem is. So, really understanding, at a business process level, what is not working, right? What are those business outcomes, those business challenges that are driving the conversation? Because nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I got to go clean me some data, right? That's not, that doesn't work, right? There's got to be a reason why. And then, the flip side is once you've got that clarity of what's actually going wrong in the business, in the day-to-day operations, what's the outcome they're not reaching, then it's, finding those point of lights in your organization, the people who know the data, allow you to actually get access to that data. And then we have another saying at Synity, let the data do the talking, right? Let's actually figure out what's actually wrong in the data that's not enabling, the process. And then let's focus on that, right? Let's not boil the ocean. Let's actually deliver some value. And to me, it's those two perspectives, right? Starting with the business process, drilling in, and then coming in from the data side and figuring out, okay, where is, the actual issue?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Pedro. I'm reminded of an example actually at one of our customers that was doing an HR migration. And it was something really simple. It was work schedules. So what days a week and what hours do you work? And, the requirement basically is take the work schedules in the old system and move them to the new one, right? Not rocket science. It's pretty easy to follow that requirement. But when we did, as you say, Pedro, we let the data speak for itself, we saw some really weird anomalies. And what it turns out was happening was every different part-time person had a slightly different schedule and had a different configuration element. So that drop-down box, when you went to hire someone, quickly became like 100 different options. And what happens when you get a drop-down box with 100 different options and you've got a stack of employees to enter? You certainly do not spend your time trying to find exactly the right one. You just create a new one, right? And so once they hit that tipping point of like 100 different options, it ballooned within the course of like a month or two to 800. And so they had a massive deduplication effort on their hands they didn't even know about just because of the the people side of it, right? And I think that's such an important point that you made there, Pedro, about data is a neutral party, right? Data is a symptom of people and process challenges.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that story, Nate. I have a story also from there was implementation we did in the food sector and grocery, and it was interesting because couldn't figure out why from an assortment perspective it's not that the data was wrong in the system. In this case, it was SAP. It's just that the data wasn't always right when they went and looked. So I mean kind of peeling back the onion on that one, ended up being a situation where there was a process that wasn't being fully enabled through data within, in this case, SAP. But what some very smart people had done was they had figured out how to pull all the data needed out of SAP and other systems. They had built this, I think it was actually Bill's assortment spreadsheet was the name of it, and they were actually building everything in Excel offline. And then, on the Thursday every week, they were uploading that into SAP in order to, get the assortment right. So, unbeknownst to them, that was causing a lot of downstream challenges around kind of, just forecasting and planning and planogram. So, it was a really easy problem to fix, right? It was about making sure that we were able to, bring the data they needed into their business process as part of what they were doing, in the case in SAP, to make that spreadsheet go away. But until you drill down and understand that, you're going to spin your wheels, really looking in the wrong place.
Definitely. So I'm curious, what makes this hard, guys? Why is data so hard?
So I think Jeff spoke to it pretty well earlier, right? The idea that it's contextual. I think he used a good example earlier, right? A vendor is not the same across all, companies. Vendor's not even the same within a company, right? So how the finance department talks about a vendor and how procurement talks about a vendor could be two totally different things. So you're right. Data is a symptom of other things, right? The people that are involved, the process that surrounds it, and without all three of those components, right, making sense of it all, it's just not going to work.
I think the other thing on why data is, I think sometimes hard is, I mean, speaking from experience, I think, a lot of the data practitioners out there, you don't go to university and come out with a degree in, data management, or maybe you do today, but certainly not kind of, in my day. And I think there's a lot of, I'd say, accidental data practitioners out there who've kind of fallen into the role. I mean, every company I walk into, every conversation, every project I'm on, there's always that one person that says, I'm in charge of data, but I don't really know what I'm doing. I was given this role because, I'm good with data. I've been here for 20 years. I collaborate well across process areas, and I'm great in Excel, right? So, I mean, I think and a lot of those folks end up being in IT. So I think the why data is so hard, because certainly, not putting words in, in Katie and Alyssa's mouth, but I think, as an organization, we don't believe data is hard. We believe data is actually easy, right? It's really the people and process side that we focus on, because, the data, again, tends to take care of itself once we know what needs to be done. It's really not that hard. Of course, when you're out, you've got your day job, data is not all you do. At Synity, data is really all we do. I like to say, data isn't what we do. It's actually, who we are and what we are, because it's how we do it. So I think that's part of the challenge. And I think as practitioners out there, we need to do a good job educating, within organizations within our organization, the importance of, not just assuming that IT or individual, can make those decisions and know what needs to be done. It's really about that partnership with, we'll say data experts, even though I don't like the expert word, but, the folks who understand, what it's going to take holistically to solve those data problems. And I think that's part of what makes data hard. We try to put IT solutions and tools in place when really it's not just about the tool. Because I've been in organizations, I can tell you, they have every tool out there, but they still have a problem, right?
Yeah, I
I
actually.
agree.
Go ahead, Katie. Sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say I agree with Pedro. To us, where we live and breathe data every day, data isn't actually. We don't see it as being that hard. I see it as being an opportunity and a challenge. One of the things when I go into a new client, I like to say, I'm here to help. I'm here to make this easier. It's a skill that we've acquired, and it's working with IT, working with the business, being that translator for, understanding what IT needs and understanding what the business needs. So that's what I think is one of my favorite parts about my job is making someone else's life easier, because it is overwhelming and it is challenging. But we are here to make it easier, and that's why I enjoy those problem-solving sessions with the business.
So what do you think are the biggest challenges, or I don't want to use the word mistake, but missteps maybe that companies run into as they start a data initiative, and as we help? Like, what are the pitfalls there?
Something I see almost every time I start a migration project, someone comes to me and says, well, the data in the system is not good. We can't use it. And I typically ask, I say, do you run the business on that data today? And I've never gotten a no on that question. And so I think it's, and that's where we have to start. We have to start with what they're using. What are they running the business on today? They need to leverage what they have and not try to rebuild or restart, because they'll just be stepping over themselves. And it's to grow and nurture that data that they have before, don't just throw it away. There's always value. And back to Pedro's statement, there is no bad data.
So from a governance perspective, I think siloing the IT and business sides, and I think I've seen that in migration as well, right? The idea that IT will get the data most of the way there, and then the business just shows up at the end and validates it. When you take that approach, guarantee you the business is going to come in and they're going to validate it and say, this is all bad, right? So no bad data, but how you got there from end to end, the processes that created it beforehand. Right now, the business is seeing it in light of their new system, wherever it's going. If you keep those two things separate, you're never going to get the results that you really need to operate as a business. And it carries over to governance, right? If you design tools to manage your data that don't involve how the business really uses that data, those tools are just not going to be successful.
Yeah, I think of our Chief Customer Officer, Leonard, has one of his many repeated phrases is this notion that, when you treat data as an IT problem, you can write a spec and code to the spec and code it perfectly and still code it perfectly wrong, right? And I think that's the pitfall that I see a lot, right? Is you can say that everyone's name should be Mickey Mouse in the spec, and we write that code and it'll load perfectly and be technically perfect. You cannot run your business on that, right? And to your point, Alyssa, it's about, what is the new system actually going to need to drive real business ready data? And how do you get from that step of meeting requirements to being actually business ready? That I think is challenging. I think, you made a good point that about the, IT handing off data to the business. And it's interesting because I think, when customers bring us in, a lot of times it's the business that brings us in as data experts. And I'm curious, and this is a jump ball to any of you guys actually, with data is considered technical, why is it the business that called us, do you think?
Well, I can jump in on this one and take the first stab at it. I think, Alyssa made a point earlier as well that, I think, a big mistake that a lot of companies make is they do treat their IT and data, they treat their data projects as IT projects. And they also tend to time box their data activities as if, data is something I need to do now in order to go live. And the irony is, that's not true. It's, data is actually something you need to do every day. And it's not just to go live, it's to make sure you've got that right behavior within your organization so that after you go live, you're still going to be okay, right? It's like, if you just went on a diet every time, you hit a certain, number on the scale, that doesn't work, right? You got to, figure out what is that kind of lifestyle change that's going to make sure you can kind of maintain that ideal kind of weight that you want. So I think, Nate, to kind of your specific question, I think it's really about making sure that when we look at the projects across a company spectrum, that we're not just focusing on the project itself and what the outcome is. It's what do we need to do around data to make sure they're sustainable.
Yeah, careful with that the weight metaphor there, Pedro, and COVID-19.
I know. But Nate, I think there was another point you were trying to make on that, right? Which I probably didn't nail.
Yeah. I think Pedro froze.
I think one of the other points along those lines about why does the business bring us in when it's a lot of times an IT problem is that the business feels the pain on a day-to-day basis. Run their processes properly because they're missing things and they're asking IT, but it doesn't hurt IT. It's a ticket. And it's in a list of things to do, whereas someone can't do their job. And so I think that's one of the reasons why, and it goes back to kind of what I was saying about, coming in to make the job easier, being able to bridge that gap between IT and the business to understand processes. One client I worked with briefly that had a great way of helping to bridge that gap was they would send their IT out into the field to work with the people in the business processes. And they had some of the best knowledge of how the business ran in the IT world. Like their IT had great experience with the actual business processes. And it was very helpful. So that was one great experience I had.
Nice.
I also think IT tends to, come up with solutions that are really, tool focused. So I think the business also gets frustrated when, going back to my metaphor earlier, when, if you just put a cleansing tool in front of the business, say you need to clean your data, the question is, well, why and what's it going to do for me, right? So I think, recognizing that from a business process perspective, I think the business often reaches out because they don't really care about keeping the data clean. They care about reaching those outcomes that, Katie just mentioned, right? So I think pivoting the conversation to, that outcome-driven approach is really how you get the business engaged. The business wants to be engaged, and traditional IT approaches just typically don't achieve that.
I think it's a great point, Pedro. So, this has been a really great conversation. I want to kind of go to one last round robin before we wrap, and just kind of get that nugget from you. What is what is a piece of advice that you would share with somebody that's about to embark on a major data initiative? Alyssa, maybe you want to start us off. Just what's your takeaway?
Sure. So data governance at this point, right? It's a box everyone knows that we should be checking, right? I think there's a lot of thought pieces around it. There's a lot of research around it. But what I find a lot of companies struggle with is the ability to get started, right? So when we're talking about data strategy, when we're talking about, information governance, it's a mountain, right? And if you don't kind of take that into pieces and really focus on the outcome of what you're trying to achieve, I think you're going to struggle to get started, right? So to break it up into smaller parts, address procurement, address cost of goods sold, right? Break those down to even to smaller parts and start to work towards those business problems. You'll get better business buy-in. You'll get, more realistic budget approval. And that helps you work towards those larger goals. Yes, eventually you do need a data strategy to get the most value out of all of your data efforts, but it's not where you need to start, to get a little bit of momentum.
Katie?
Well, Alyssa was great. I also think from a migration perspective, embarking on a major or even minor data migration or any data effort is daunting. You have so much that you have to tackle. I think one of the best pieces of advice is to figure out what can be reusable and what can be repeatable. And if you're trying to tackle a global project, yes, all of the regions, all of the countries are special, but there is overlap. They're all going through the same process, and making sure to be able to leverage what you've done in previous waves or in different areas, and use that again and not lose that knowledge. So having, higher level overview of all the things that are going on, I I think it's very valuable. If it's done right, once the migration is complete, you can leverage all of that for governance. I think Alyssa would like that.
That's right. Good plug.
Yeah.
I'd say that, thinking about this virtual summit we're putting on and sort of the theme of, where business and data converge, I think we just need to, I think every CIO and senior VP, everybody out there wants to be data driven. They want to be data driven. They want to have, the right data. But I think we need to just stop talking about data. I think as data practitioners, we tend to lead with the D word. And I think there's one thing I'd like to, call out to all the data practitioners out there is we need to stop leading with data, right? We need to stop talking about data. We need to talk about, business outcomes. Maria Villar, if you haven't watched Maria's kind of YouTube, series on, kind of that, it's awesome content. I think we need to really understand that, data is a means to an end. And we can't have the tail wag the dog, right? So I think less data, more business outcomes really needs to be where the conversation pivots.
Thanks, Pedro. And thanks to all of you. I think that's going to be a wrap for our experts. I wanted to thank you all for your insights and your willingness to share them with our audience. I am sure I'll be talking with you guys soon. To our audience, I hope you found the whole virtual summit to be worthwhile. And on behalf of our experts, we're so proud to have been a part of it. So stay safe, be well, and take good care of your data, everybody.
Thanks, Nate.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Nate.
Thank you.
Bye.
My name's Ellie Sordi, and it's been an honour being your concierge for Synity's Virtual Summit Unlocked. Thank you again for your participation and for sharing the Virtual Summit. In case you've missed or would like to revisit any sessions, they are now available on demand. Please do share the Virtual Summit and its content with your friends and colleagues by sharing the Virtual Summit URL.